Undercover boss removed from VIP lounge. 25 minutes later, he fired the entire management staff. The rain drummed against the taxi window as Marcus Chen stared at the towering glass building before him. 27 floors of steel and ambition piercing the Seattle skyline. His creation, his legacy. Yet today, he felt like a stranger approaching a fortress. "Keep the change," Marcus muttered, handing the driver a crumpled $20 bill. His voice carried none of the authority that once commanded boardrooms across 3 continents. Instead, it was the voice of someone forgotten, someone invisible. He stepped onto the sidewalk, adjusting his worn gray suit, a far cry from the Italian tailored pieces that once hung in his executive wardrobe. The fabric was cheap, slightly too large, and bore the faint smell of a thrift store. His usually perfectly groomed hair was now disheveled, streaked with gray he never bothered to color. Wire-rimmed glasses, deliberately scratched and outdated, completed the transformation. Marcus had spent 3 years away from Pinnacle Dynamics, the technology empire he built from a garage startup into a Fortune 500 company. 3 years of voluntary exile after his wife Sarah's death, when grief had consumed him so completely that running the company felt impossible. He'd left it in the hands of his hand-picked management team, trusting them to preserve the vision he'd fought so hard to create. But the reports that trickled back to him during his recovery told a different story. Profits were up, dramatically so, but something felt wrong. The company's culture, once built on innovation and integrity, seemed to be shifting towards something he didn't recognize. Employee satisfaction surveys, when he could get his hands on them, painted a picture of fear and frustration. The values he'd instilled were being replaced by something colder, more calculating. That's why he was here today, disguised as Marcus Thompson, a modest businessman hoping to secure a consulting contract. No one would recognize him. He'd made sure of that. The lobby was exactly as he remembered it, yet entirely different. The same polished marble floors reflected the same artistic lighting, but the energy was wrong. Employees hurried past with their eyes down, their conversations muted and careful. The receptionist, a young woman he didn't recognize, barely looked up from her computer screen when visitors approached. "Excuse me," Marcus said, approaching her desk with the slightly hunched posture he'd been practicing. "I have a meeting with the procurement department." "Marcus Thompson." The receptionist's fingers flew across her keyboard with mechanical precision. "Third floor, suite 312. Elevators are to your right." Her tone was professionally cold, devoid of the warmth that used to characterize Pinnacle's customer service. As Marcus waited for the elevator, he watched the morning rush unfold around him. Executives in expensive suits strode purposefully toward private elevators, their conversations peppered with jargon about optimizing human resources and maximizing efficiency metrics. Their laughter was sharp, predatory, nothing like the collaborative energy that once filled these halls. The elevator doors opened to reveal 2 middle managers deep in conversation. Marcus stepped in, making himself small in the corner. "Did you see William's face when Peterson told him his department was being restructured?" One of them chuckled. "I thought the guy was going to cry right there in the meeting. Peterson's cleaning house. Anyone who can't keep up with the new standards is gone." "About time, if you asked me," the other replied. "The old guard was too soft. Chen's touchy-feely management style would never work in today's market." Marcus's jaw tightened at the mention of his own name, spoken with such casual dismissal. These weren't faces he recognized. They must have been hired after his departure. Yet they spoke of him like they'd known him personally, like they'd personally witnessed the failure of his leadership philosophy. "Chen was brilliant at the technical stuff," the first manager continued. "But he never understood that business is battle. Peterson gets it. You either dominate or get dominated. No room for weakness." The elevator dinged at the 3rd floor, and Marcus stepped out, his mind racing. Peterson, that had to be Richard Peterson, his former VP of operations. A man he'd mentored, trusted, promoted. A man who apparently now viewed Marcus's entire leadership approach as weakness. The procurement department meeting was a masterclass in corporate theater. Marcus sat across from three managers who treated him with barely concealed condescension, their questions designed more to demonstrate their superiority than to understand his proposed services. "Mr. Thompson," said Janet Mills, the department head, "your resume shows extensive experience, but frankly, we're looking for consultants who understand modern business realities. The days of hand-holding and employee coddling are over. We need results, not feelings." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, playing his role. "I completely understand. What kind of results are you seeing with your current approach?" "Productivity is up 30% since we restructured," Mills replied proudly. "We eliminated redundancies, streamlined processes, and established clear performance metrics. Employees know exactly what's expected of them now." "And morale?" Mills laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Morale doesn't pay the bills, Mr. Thompson. Happy employees are nice in theory, but profitable employees are what keep the lights on. We've learned that the hard way." As the meeting progressed, Marcus gathered intelligence about his company's transformation. The open-door policy he cherished had been replaced by rigid hierarchies. Innovation time, the 20% of work hours employees could dedicate to creative projects, had been eliminated as inefficient. The employee assistance programs he'd fought to establish were being phased out as unnecessary expenses. But the most shocking revelation came when Mills mentioned the VIP lounge. "We've created an exclusive environment for our top performers and key clients," she explained. "The VIP lounge on the 15th floor is reserved for executives and approved guests only. It sends a clear message about who matters in this organization." Marcus remembered the 15th floor. It used to house the Employee Recreation Center, a space he designed for all staff to relax, collaborate, and recharge. The idea that it had been converted into an elitist sanctuary made his stomach turn. After the meeting ended with a polite but clear rejection, Marcus found himself standing in the hallway, processing everything he'd learned. The company he'd built on principles of equality and innovation had become exactly what he'd always fought against, a place where hierarchy mattered more than humanity. He checked his watch, 11:47 a.m. The executive lunch rush would be starting soon. If he wanted to see the full extent of this transformation, there was only one place to go: the VIP lounge. As he rode the elevator to the 15th floor, Marcus felt a mixture of dread and determination. He was about to see his worst fears confirmed, but he needed to witness it firsthand. He needed to understand how completely his vision had been corrupted. The elevator doors opened to reveal a hallway he barely recognized. Gone were the motivational posters and employee achievement boards. In their place hung abstract art pieces that probably cost more than most employees' annual salaries. The door at the end of the hall bore a simple bronze plaque: "VIP Lounge authorized personnel only." Marcus straightened his cheap tie and walked toward the door, his heart pounding with a mixture of anger and anticipation. He was about to discover just how far his company had fallen from grace. And in 25 minutes, everything would change forever. Marcus approached the mahogany door with measured steps, his hand reaching for the polished brass handle. The moment his fingers made contact, a sharp voice cut through the air behind him. "Excuse me, sir?" "Sir!" He turned to see a security guard striding toward him with purposeful authority. The man was younger than Marcus, probably in his 30s, with the kind of build that suggested he enjoyed intimidating people smaller than himself. His name tag read Rodriguez, but his expression read pure disdain. "This area is restricted," Rodriguez said, positioning himself between Marcus and the door. "VIP members and approved guests only." Marcus maintained his humble demeanor, slightly hunching his shoulders. "I apologize. I was told I might be able to speak with some executives about a potential consulting opportunity." "Marcus Thompson." He extended his hand, which Rodriguez ignored. "Right." The security guard's eyes traveled from Marcus's scuffed shoes to his ill-fitting suit, his lip curling slightly. "And you are a VIP member how, exactly?" "Well, I'm not a member per se, but..." "Then you don't belong here." Rodriguez crossed his arms, making his biceps strain against his uniform. This lounge is for successful professionals only. People who've earned the right to be here. The condescension in his voice was unmistakable, but what struck Marcus most was the genuine belief behind it. This wasn't just a man doing his job. This was someone who had fully bought into the new hierarchy that had infected his company. Perhaps I could just wait in the lobby area? Marcus suggested, gesturing towards some chairs he could see through the glass panels beside the door. I won't disturb anyone. Rodriguez laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that echoed in the hallway. Listen, buddy. I don't know who told you that you could just wander around here in your thrift store suit, pretending to be somebody, but this isn't a charity. We don't give handouts to wannabe consultants. Marcus felt his jaw clench, but he forced himself to remain calm. I understand there are protocols. Perhaps you could check with someone about. Check with someone? Rodriguez's voice rose, attracting the attention of several executives who had emerged from nearby offices. What part of you don't belong here is confusing you? The gathering crowd was exactly what Marcus had hoped to avoid, but also exactly what he needed to see. 3 executives in expensive suits had stopped to watch the confrontation, their faces showing a mixture of amusement and disgust. Rodriguez, what's the commotion? Called out a woman Marcus recognized as Sandra Vale, someone he'd hired 5 years ago as a junior analyst. She was now dressed in a designer suit that probably cost more than most employees' monthly salary. Found this guy trying to sneak into the VIP lounge, Rodriguez replied, puffing up with self-importance. Claims he's some kind of consultant. Vale looked Marcus up and down with the same disdainful expression Rodriguez had shown. A consultant? In that outfit? She laughed, and the other executives joined in. What kind of consulting could you possibly offer us? Marcus felt a familiar fire building in his chest, the same righteous anger that had driven him to build Pinnacle Dynamics in the first place. But he held his tongue, recognizing that this moment was teaching him more about his company's transformation than any report ever could. Maybe janitorial consulting, suggested another executive, a man Marcus didn't recognize. He certainly looks qualified for that. The laughter grew louder, more cruel. Rodriguez seemed energized by the audience, stepping closer to Marcus with obvious intimidation tactics. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises, Rodriguez announced loudly. You're making our VIP members uncomfortable. I'm just trying to. No. Rodriguez's voice boomed through the hallway. You're done trying. Security is escorting you out. Now. He grabbed Marcus's arm roughly, his fingers digging into the cheap fabric of the suit. The executives watched with evident satisfaction, as if they were witnessing justice being served. This is unnecessary, Marcus said quietly, but Rodriguez was already steering him toward the elevator. Tell it to someone who cares, the security guard replied. We get people like you in here all the time, thinking you can fake your way into success. Well, this is the real world, and you just learned a valuable lesson. As they reached the elevator, Marcus caught sight of more faces in the crowd that had gathered to watch his humiliation. Employees he'd once known, people he'd promoted and supported, now looking at him with the same mixture of contempt and amusement as the executives. The elevator doors opened, and Rodriguez shoved Marcus inside with unnecessary force. Next time, know your place, he said as the doors began to close. But Marcus didn't press the button for the ground floor. Instead, he pressed the button for the 14th floor, close enough to observe, far enough to remain invisible. As the elevator descended one floor and the doors opened, he stepped out into an empty hallway. He had work to do. 25 minutes of observation that would determine the fate of everyone who had just humiliated him. Through the stairwell window, he could see into the VIP lounge. And what he saw there would change everything. Marcus positioned himself carefully in the stairwell, where the large windows provided a perfect view into what used to be the Employee Recreation Center. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was now spying on his own company from the shadows, watching the very people who had just thrown him out like common trash. The VIP lounge was a monument to excess. Leather furniture that probably cost more than most employees' cars filled the space where ping-pong tables and comfortable couches once encouraged collaboration. A fully stocked bar occupied the corner where the employee suggestion box used to hang. Crystal chandeliers had replaced the simple, warm lighting he'd personally selected to create a welcoming atmosphere. But it wasn't the expensive decor that made his blood boil, it was what he witnessed in the first 5 minutes. Sandra Vale strutted back into the lounge, still laughing about the pathetic consultant they'd just ejected. She walked straight to the bar and poured herself a glass of what looked like expensive whiskey. At 12:15 in the afternoon. On company time. "Did you see his face when Rodriguez grabbed him?" she said to the group of executives who had followed her in. "I thought he was going to wet himself." The laughter that followed was sharp and cruel. Marcus recognized 2 other faces in the crowd, David Kim, whom he'd promoted to department head 3 years ago, and Jennifer Walsh, a former intern he'd personally mentored. Both were now dressed like they belonged in a country club rather than a technology company. "The best part," Kim chimed in, "was when he tried to shake Rodriguez's hand. Like we were going to treat him as an equal." He grabbed a handful of expensive-looking hors d'oeuvres from a silver tray. "These people never learn their place." Marcus checked his watch, 12:17. He had been observing for 2 minutes, and already his worldview was crumbling. A woman he didn't recognize, probably hired after his departure, was on her phone near the window. Her voice carried clearly through the glass. "No, tell Williams his department's budget is cut by another 15%. She was saying. "I don't care if it means laying off more people. The VIP lounge renovation came in over budget, and someone has to pay for it." She paused, listening. "Fire whoever complains. We have plenty of desperate people who will work for less." Marcus felt sick. The renovation she was talking about, his employee recreation center, had been gutted and turned into this temple of elitism, and workers were being fired to pay for it. By minute 7, he witnessed Jennifer Walsh bragging about a recent cost-cutting measure that had eliminated the Employee Child Care Assistance Program, a program Marcus had fought the board for months to establish. $20,000 a month we were throwing away on babysitting," Walsh said, refilling her wine glass. "Now that money goes toward executive bonuses where it belongs. Why should we subsidize their poor life choices?" The casual cruelty in her voice was stunning. Marcus remembered Walsh as a young, idealistic graduate who had once told him she wanted to work for a company that made a difference in people's lives. Now she was discussing the destruction of employees' support systems like she was talking about the weather. At minute 12, David Kim received a phone call that made Marcus's hands shake with rage. "Johnson wants to meet about his mother's medical leave?" Kim laughed into the phone. "Tell him we don't do extended compassionate leave anymore. If he can't handle his personal problems and maintain productivity, he can find another job." He paused. "No, I don't care if she's dying. Business is business." Marcus remembered Johnson, a loyal employee who had been with the company for 8 years. His mother had been battling cancer when Marcus left. Apparently, the new management had decided that human compassion was bad for the bottom line. By minute 18, he had watched Sandra Vale approve an expense report for a $3,000 lunch, the same day she had bragged about cutting the employee wellness program. He had seen Kim mock an email from a subordinate who was requesting mental health resources, calling the employee weak and liability. He had witnessed 3 different executives discussing ways to manipulate performance reviews to justify firing long-term employees who commanded higher salaries. At minute 22, the most devastating moment came. A server, one of the remaining employees not dressed in designer suits, entered with a fresh tray of food. Marcus recognized her immediately, Maria Santos, a single mother who had worked in the accounting department when he was CEO. "More champagne," Vale demanded without looking up from her conversation. When Maria hesitated, clearly confused since she worked in accounting, not catering, Vale's voice turned vicious. "Are you deaf? I said more champagne." "No. Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake," Maria said quietly. "I work in. I don't care what department you're supposed to be in. Kim interrupted. You're here, we need service, so serve. Unless you prefer to look for a new job. Marcus watched Maria's shoulders slump in defeat as she walked to the bar. The woman who had once been praised for her innovative cost analysis reports was now being treated like a servant because she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. At minute 25, Marcus had seen enough. His company, his life's work, had become everything he had sworn it would never be. A place where human dignity was sacrificed for profit margins, where cruelty was mistaken for strength, and where the very people he had trusted to preserve his vision had instead corrupted it beyond recognition. He pulled out his phone and made a call that would change everything. Peterson? This is Marcus Chin. I'll be in the building in 5 minutes. Call an emergency meeting of the entire management staff. Everyone. No exceptions. It was time to remind them who really owned this company. The emergency meeting was called for the main conference room on the 20th floor, the same room where Marcus had once announced Pinnacle Dynamics' first major breakthrough. Now, as he rode the elevator up in his disguise one last time, he could hear the nervous chatter of executives wondering why Richard Peterson had summoned them so urgently. Did anyone see Peterson today? Sandra Vale's voice carried from inside the conference room as Marcus positioned himself just outside the door. He sounded strange on the phone. Probably another efficiency review. David Kim replied dismissively. Maybe he's finally ready to clean out more of the dead weight from the lower floors. Marcus pushed open the conference room door and stepped inside. The conversations died immediately as 23 members of the management staff turned to stare at the man they had humiliated less than an hour ago. What the hell is he doing here? Rodriguez demanded, half rising from his chair. I told you to leave the building. Jennifer Walsh looked confused and annoyed. How did security let this clown back in? Peterson, what's going on? Richard Peterson sat at the head of the table, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly. Unlike the others, he had recognized something in that phone call, a tone he hadn't heard in 3 years but could never forget. Sit down, Rodriguez, Peterson said quietly. His voice lacked its usual commanding authority. Marcus walked slowly around the conference table, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Every pair of eyes followed him, a mixture of confusion, irritation, and growing unease painting their faces. Interesting meeting you have here, Marcus said, his voice still carrying the humble tone of Marcus Thompson. Mind if I join you? Are you insane? Sandra Vale's voice cracked with indignation. Security, remove this man immediately. But Rodriguez remained seated, something in Peterson's demeanor warning him to stay put. The room felt electric with tension, though most of the executives couldn't understand why. Marcus reached the front of the room and turned to face them. I want to tell you all a story, he began, his voice growing stronger with each word. About a man who built a company from nothing. Who believed that business success and human dignity could coexist. Peterson, who is this lunatic? David Kim interrupted. Why are we listening to? Because, Marcus said, reaching up to remove his wire-rimmed glasses. That man is standing right in front of you. The glasses clattered onto the conference table. Marcus straightened his posture, his shoulders broadening as he shed the humble demeanor he'd worn like armor. His voice, when he spoke again, carried the authority that had once commanded boardrooms across 3 continents. My name is Marcus Chin. I founded this company. I am the majority shareholder. And I have spent the last 25 minutes watching you destroy everything I built. The silence that followed was deafening. Sandra Vale's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. David Kim's face went white as understanding crashed over him. Jennifer Walsh actually gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Only Peterson seemed unsurprised, though he looked like a man watching his execution. Impossible, Rodriguez whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. Looking at Marcus now, really looking, the resemblance to the company portraits scattered throughout the building was unmistakable. 25 minutes, Marcus continued, his voice cutting through their shock like a blade. That's how long I watched you mock employees, waste company resources, and abandon every principle this company was founded on. He pulled out his phone and swiped to the voice recorder app. 25 minutes of recorded conversations about firing people for having sick family members. About cutting childcare assistance to pay for crystal chandeliers. About treating dedicated employees like servants. Sandra Vale found her voice first, scrambling to salvage the situation. Mr. Chin, if you're really, there must be some misunderstanding. We've been following Peterson's directives, and the company's profits have never been higher. Profits built on what? Marcus's voice rose, the full force of his anger finally breaking through. On the backs of employees you've terrorized? On the destruction of programs that supported families? On turning my employee recreation center into your personal country club? He began pacing, his energy filling the room like a storm. Jennifer, do you remember what you told me during your internship interview? You said you wanted to work for a company that valued people over profits. What happened to that idealistic young woman? Jennifer Walsh couldn't meet his eyes. Business requires difficult decisions. Business requires leadership, not cruelty. Marcus slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. David, you once thanked me for the compassionate leave policy after your father's surgery. Today I watched you deny that same compassion to Johnson, whose mother is dying of cancer. Kim opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Marcus turned to Rodriguez, who was shrinking lower in his chair with each passing moment. And you? You grabbed me, mocked my appearance, threw me out of my own building because I didn't look successful enough for your tastes. The security guard's earlier bravado had completely evaporated. Sir, I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You saw someone you perceived as beneath you and decided they deserved humiliation. Marcus walked back to the head of the table, his presence commanding the room in a way Peterson's never had. I trusted you all to preserve something sacred. Instead, you turned it into everything I fought against. The room remained frozen in stunned silence, 23 careers hanging in the balance, as the ghost they thought they'd buried stood before them, very much alive and absolutely furious. The question now, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, is what we do next. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Sandra Vale broke, her voice cracking with desperation. Marcus, please. We can fix this. We can change. Change? Marcus's laugh was cold and bitter. You want to talk about change? 3 years. I gave you 3 years to honor the vision we built together. Instead, you turned my company into a playground for your egos. He walked to the massive windows overlooking the city, his hands clasped behind his back. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Richard Peterson, you're terminated. Effective immediately. Peterson's face went ashen, but he didn't protest. Perhaps he understood better than the others what was coming. Security escort Mr. Peterson from the building. His access cards are revoked as of this moment. Marcus turned back to face the room. Sandra Vale, you're terminated for embezzlement of company funds and creation of a hostile work environment. Embezzlement? Vale shot to her feet, her composure finally cracking completely. That's insane! Everything I did was approved. By whom? Marcus's voice cut through her protests like a scalpel. The $50,000 VIP lounge renovation that you funded by cutting employee benefits. The daily $100 lunches charged to client entertainment when you were entertaining only yourselves? The company credit card used for personal shopping sprees? Vale's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Around the table, other executives were beginning to understand that Marcus had evidence, real, documented evidence, of their misconduct. David Kim, terminated for violation of employment law and discrimination policies. Your treatment of employees requesting medical leave wasn't just cruel, it was illegal. Kim found his voice, though it shook with panic. You can't do this. We have contracts, severance agreements. Read your contracts more carefully, Marcus replied. Termination for cause voids your severance packages. And trust me, I have cause. He pulled out a tablet and began reading from detailed notes. Jennifer Walsh, terminated for misappropriation of funds and ethical violations. The childcare assistance program you eliminated wasn't just a company benefit, it was legally mandated as part of our federal compliance agreement. Your actions put the entire company at risk of federal investigation. Walsh burst into tears, the weight of her destroyed career finally hitting her. I was following orders. Peterson told us to cut costs. Peterson's termination doesn't excuse your choices. You had the authority to refuse unethical directives. Instead, you embraced them. Marcus continued around the table with mechanical precision, each termination delivered with devastating specificity. The facilities manager who had approved converting the employee recreation center while knowing it violated the company's charter. The HR director who had systematically eliminated worker protections. The finance director who had hidden the true cost of executive perks by reclassifying them as business expenses. Rodriguez, Marcus said, his voice carrying a particular edge of contempt. You're not just terminated. I'm filing a complaint with the Security Licensing Board for attack and creating a hostile work environment. Your career in corporate security is over. Rodriguez, who had been so confident and intimidating an hour earlier, was now trembling in his chair. Please, Mr. Chen. I have a family. I need this job. You should have thought about your family before you decided to humiliate someone you perceived as beneath you. Actions have consequences, Rodriguez. Today, you learned what those consequences look like. The purge continued with relentless efficiency. 23 terminations in total, each one delivered with surgical precision and backed by documented evidence of misconduct. Some begged, others tried to shift blame, a few maintained defiant silence. None of it mattered. But it was the final moment that would haunt them all. I want you to understand something, Marcus said, his voice filling the now half-empty room as security began escorting the terminated managers out. This isn't revenge. This isn't about wounded pride or hurt feelings. This is about accountability. He gestured toward the windows, toward the floors below where thousands of employees continued working, unaware that their world was about to change dramatically. Every single one of you had the power to say no. When Peterson suggested cutting employee benefits to fund your luxury lounge, you could have refused. When you were asked to eliminate programs that helped working families, you could have stood up for what was right. When you saw colleagues being cruel to subordinates, you could have intervened. Sandra Vale, being escorted past him by security, stopped and turned back. We made the company profitable. We increased shareholder value. Marcus met her eyes with a gaze that was both sad and implacable. At what cost, Sandra? You destroyed the soul of this company to pad its bank account. You forgot that businesses are made of people, not just profit margins. As the last of the terminated executives was led from the room, Marcus stood alone in the conference room that had once buzzed with innovation and collaboration. The silence was profound, but it wasn't empty. It was the silence of a fresh start, of poison being extracted from a wound. He pulled out his phone and dialed the company's internal communication system. This is Marcus Chen speaking to all Pinnacle Dynamics employees. In 5 minutes, I'll be addressing the entire company. Please gather in your department areas for an important announcement. The purge was complete. Now came the harder task, rebuilding what had been destroyed, one employee at a time. Marcus stood in the same lobby where his journey had begun just hours earlier, but everything felt different now. The employees gathering around him carried a mixture of confusion, hope, and barely contained excitement. Word had spread quickly through the building. The legendary founder had returned, and the management structure that had terrorized them for 3 years was gone. Most of you don't know me personally, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the packed lobby. 3 years ago, I left this company in the hands of people I trusted. Today, I discovered that trust was misplaced. He looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, many new, all watching him with intense curiosity. Near the back, he spotted Maria Santos, the accounting employee who had been humiliated in the VIP lounge. She stood with a group of her colleagues, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time in months. I returned today disguised as a consultant, wanting to see how the company I built was being run in my absence. What I found broke my heart. The values we once shared, respect, innovation, and human dignity, had been replaced by cruelty, waste, and arrogance. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some employees nodded knowingly, while others looked around nervously, still processing the magnitude of the changes happening around them. I watched a security guard mock someone for their appearance. I saw executives drinking expensive wine while cutting programs that help working families. I witnessed managers treating dedicated employees like servants. His voice grew stronger with each revelation. This ends today. Marcus pulled out a tablet containing his preliminary notes. Effective immediately, we're implementing several changes. First, the Employee Recreation Center on the 15th floor is being restored. The so-called VIP lounge is hereby dissolved. Spontaneous applause erupted from the crowd. Some employees were actually crying with relief. Second, all employee support programs that were eliminated, child care assistance, mental health resources, compassionate leave policies, are being reinstated with expanded benefits. The applause grew louder. Marcus held up his hand for silence. Third, we're establishing an employee advocacy board with rotating representatives from every department. No policy changes affecting workers will be implemented without their input. Your voices will be heard. He paused, scanning the crowd until he found Maria Santos. Maria, could you come forward, please? Maria's eyes widened in surprise as her colleagues gently pushed her toward the front. She approached Marcus hesitantly, clearly uncertain why she was being singled out. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus announced, I'd like you to meet our new Director of Employee Relations, Maria Santos. The lobby erupted. Maria's hands flew to her mouth in shock as applause thundered around her. Mr. Chen, I don't understand. You've been with this company for 8 years, Marcus said, his voice warm but firm. You've consistently shown integrity, innovation, and dedication. More importantly, I watched you maintain your dignity today when others tried to diminish it. Those are the qualities we need in leadership. Tears streamed down Maria's face as she nodded acceptance. Around her, employees cheered louder than they had in years. Marcus turned back to address the full assembly. I'm not going to pretend the changes will be easy. We're starting over in many ways. But we're going to build something better than what we had before, a company that proves profitability and humanity aren't mutually exclusive. He gestured toward the upper floors where the purge had taken place. The positions left vacant today will be filled through internal promotion first. We're going to grow our own leaders, people who understand our values because they've lived them. A young man near the front raised his hand tentatively. Mr. Chen, how do we know this won't happen again? How do we trust that things will really change? Marcus smiled at the question. You hold me accountable. Every month, I'll hold open forums where anyone can challenge company decisions. Every quarter, we'll review our policies together. And if you ever see me or any leader forgetting these principles, you call us out. That's not just your right, it's your responsibility. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Today marks a new chapter for Pinnacle Dynamics. Not because I'm back, but because we're choosing to remember what this company was meant to be. A place where innovation thrives, where people matter, and where success is measured not just in profit margins but in the positive impact we have on each other's lives. He looked around the lobby one final time, seeing hope where hours earlier there had been only fear and resignation. Let's get back to work. We have a company to rebuild. As the crowd began to disperse, employees lingered to shake Marcus's hand, share their stories, and express their gratitude. The energy in the building was electric, not with fear as it had been that morning, but with possibility. Marcus watched Maria Santos already organizing groups of employees to discuss the restoration of their recreation center. He saw department heads who had survived the purge meeting to plan more collaborative approaches to their work. Most importantly, he saw smiles on faces that had forgotten how to hope. The undercover boss had returned. But more than that, the soul of Pinnacle Dynamics had been reborn. 25 minutes had changed everything. Now came the real work. proving that a company could succeed by lifting people up instead of tearing them down. The new dawn had begun.